Today I'm sharing all of my most loved and most made recipes, as requested by you. From baked oats, blended oats and overnight oats, to my favourite sourdough recipes, luxurious stews and curries, to quick meals, delicious desserts and sides I have on repeat. This is my little series where I take your requests in the comments and turn them into videos. So if you have any ideas you'd love for me to make, then as always, please do let me know. Okay, if you want to support my channel, please give the video a thumbs up, but only if you liked it, and consider subscribing if you never want to miss another video. And if you want to go a little further, you can join my channel membership for ad and sponsorship free content. Okay, grab a cup of tea and let's get into it. Over the summer, I became obsessed with overnight oats, and apple and blackberry became my favourite combination of flavours to put together just because I love autumn recipes. I found that these were really helpful for quick breakfast in the morning, taking on hikes with me, taking camping, on road trips, anything that was convenient. And they're super simple to make. I put apples, blackberry and some sugar or maple syrup, whatever you want to sweeten it, and put it on the stove and cook that down for a few minutes. Then I simply added all the other ingredients to the jar, mixed everything, and then put the apple stuff on top. And the best thing about this is you can mix and match all you want. I put oats, yogurt, plant milk and chia seeds, but you can also add hemp seeds, change up the milk or the yogurt, put more or less oats, and just make sure it's a texture that you actually like. I tend to prep maybe 2 or 3 of these ahead of time, and they just make life so much more convenient. The premise for the blended oats is very similar, except I just put all of the ingredients into the blender. This changes the texture and makes it a lot more smooth. So if you like that kind of texture, it really helps to incorporate all of the flavors really nicely. I like to add banana bread spices to my blended oats just because I love those flavors and it just tastes so nice, especially if you add in a few caramelized bananas as well. I think the blended oats are my preferred hiking snack to take, or my hiking breakfast, which I'll eat maybe 2 or 3 hours into my hike. And that's mainly because the blended texture really helps to go down a lot faster, especially when you're pretty hungry, but you also want to digest that food nice and quickly to use that energy for your hike. If blended or overnight oats are not your thing, then baked oats might be the thing that you choose. This is really great for meal prepping. It also just adds a different texture and you can make it into so many different flavors. I'm a big fan of making my oats into all the dessert flavors that I really like. So for the first one, I made a carrot cake baked oats. And it's very simple. You literally just shove all the ingredients into a baking tray and then you bake it in the oven nice and slow for about 40 minutes. I give it plenty of time to cool down before putting on some plant-based yogurt on top, whatever flavor I like. And then depending on the recipe, I might put some nuts on top, some extra seasonings or spices or anything like that. And then I would just simply put it in the fridge with a lid on and cut a slice whenever I'm ready. I always end up taking a slice that's slightly too big, but it tastes like dessert to me, so I never really mind. I left my favorite one till last, and that is a tiramisu inspired baked oats. This has things like coffee, cocoa powder, and all the other kind of ingredients that you would associate with tiramisu. And on top, I specifically chose a really nice and creamy plant yogurt, so it kind of gave the same texture as having cream. This is a really simple recipe, as mentioned before. You put all the ingredients into a baking tray, bake it in the oven at 350 for about 40 minutes, and then you allow it to cool down before putting any of your toppings on. The one thing that is in baked oats that isn't in the other ones is some baking powder, but apart from that, all the ingredients are very similar, and to be honest, you can play with the ratios depending on how much spice levels you like, how much yogurt you want to have on top, and if you want to have just loads and loads of cocoa powder and even maybe some chocolate chips. Okay, we're moving on to breads, and bagels are one of my tried and true absolute favorite easy breads to make because I think they look more intimidating than they actually are. You're going to bloom your yeast for about 10 minutes first. Just put it in your warm water, give it a mix and leave it to the side. Then you'll mix all your dry ingredients together and then you'll put your bloomed mixture in with it. I like to put this in a stand mixer, but you don't really need to. You can also just mix it together and then you want to knead it for about 10 minutes. This makes it really nice and smooth and elastic. Once you've done that, then you'll put it back into a bowl, which should be oiled, and leave it to double in size. This could take an hour, 2 hours, depending on how warm your kitchen is. And then you're going to split it into about 6 balls. Make sure you're folding in the sides into the middle of the ball to kind of create that round shape, and then use the friction of your countertop to really seal those sides underneath. At this point, I actually like to let them rise again and make the hole afterwards. I'll leave it for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour again, just until they're puffy. Then I will boil some water, boil them for about 1 minute on each side, and bake in the oven for about 20 minutes. I recently started experimenting with a enriched dough for a sandwich bread, and I've really landed on this one that kind of feels like bread, kind of feels like brioche. It just tastes so good. For blooming my mixture, I just go straight in with my milk. I like to use a stand mixer for this because once we put in all the dry ingredients, we then put in all the wet ingredients, and then we slowly incorporate the butter into the mixture, and I just find this a lot easier using a stand mixer. With the dough hook, I allow it to knead for about 8 minutes. I'll take it out and shape it, put it back in the bowl and let it double in size. Once it has, I will roll it out into a big rectangle and then roll it up into a kind of sausage shape. Then I'll put it in the container that I'm going to bake it in and allow it to rise again. This will probably take me about an hour, just until it's kind of doubled in size again. Then I'll bake it in the oven for about 25 minutes. And it produces the most delicious sandwich bread that I make this on repeat, and it's really great to put in the freezer as well. I think the only negative about this is that it doesn't last very long before going a little bit stale, so it's one of those recipes I would highly recommend making and then eating within a couple of days. If you're like me and you love the festive season, or to be honest, you just love a cracker with some cheese, then these are the crackers that I've been making on repeat every single time I make any kind of cheese board. They're extremely easy to make, and you just need to be prepared to make them the day before you actually want to eat them. So I put all the dry ingredients in a bowl, the flour, fruits and nuts, spices, all of that, give it a good mix, and then I put in the liquids, which is just plant milk. You can use honey or maple syrup or agave, something to sweeten it. Give that a really nice mix, and then you bake it in the oven. Once it's ready, you will leave it to cool down completely, and then you'll actually freeze it. The next day you'll bring it out and slice it up, and then you'll put it back in the oven to really crisp up. And that's honestly it. These are honestly so delicious, and I never buy crackers anymore. If you only want to have half, you could just leave half of it in the freezer, take one half out, and then bake in the oven just one half so you only have what you need. I think it will last at least a month or two in the freezer before needing to be eaten. Okay, let's talk about sourdough. I have definitely tweaked my sourdough recipe quite a few times, and I will alternate between doing a kind of 50-50 white wholemeal, and then I'll also just do mostly white and a little bit of wholemeal. So the ratios I kind of tend to go for now are about 700 grams, and this is for 2 loaves, 700 grams of white bread flour and then 200 grams of whole wheat flour. Because of the whole wheat flour, I will then have to do a little bit more water, so I tend to opt for about 750 grams of water. This is definitely a slightly higher hydration, so the dough is a little bit less easy to work with. So if you don't like that, you can always go down and just do about 700 grams of water. I'll then use about 200 grams of active starter. I'll use about 20 grams of salt, and that's it, unless I'm putting any kind of flavorings in there. This is my very standard recipe for sourdough now. I tend to like to mix my flour and water together, leave it for about an hour before adding in my starter and my salt. I like to do this just because it makes the dough easier to stretch and fold. And once I have added in my starter and salt, I'll then leave it for an hour, and I'll do about 6 stretch and folds, leaving them about an hour in between. I know some people like to leave it about half an hour in between, but I just find that my dough is much more relaxed and way easier to stretch if I do it on the hour rather than the half an hour. Once my dough is about double in size, or if I leave it a bit too long and overproof it just a little bit, I will then shape it. So I'll stretch it out on a floured surface and roll it up. I'll leave it on the countertop for about 20 minutes. I'll reshape it, and then I'll put it in its banneton for about an hour to proof. Then I'll just simply put it in the fridge overnight covered, and then in the morning I will bake it. If I'm making one big loaf, I'll bake it for about 36 minutes at 500 degrees and then take the lid off, and about another 15 minutes at 445, 455. But if I'm splitting it into 2 loaves, then I'll do about 25 minutes at 500, and then with the lid off about 15 minutes at 445. And then I'll leave it for a full hour to make sure it is cooled down before chopping into it. I do have a full video that is all about sourdough that goes into this in much more depth if you are looking for that. I probably haven't posted about this salad very often, but this is something I make on repeat constantly. For me, it's something very easy to put together. Some kale, any vegetables, or even fruit, olives, anything I have on hand. I'll throw it into a salad with at least one kind of protein, like a lentil. Lentil's really great because it has a lot of protein and fiber and carbs, so it gets all of those things together. I like to massage massage the kale just to break it down a little bit. I find that it tastes a lot nicer, and I find that the texture of it is so much better as well. I'm a big fan of Greek salad, so I just kind of base some of the things off that, and I would try to make a Greek salad if I had all the ingredients for that first. But I did start making this salad because I can add in the lentils and it fits really nicely with the rest of the salad texture and ingredients. To be honest, I use most salads as a vehicle to have a tahini dressing because tahini dressings are so delicious, and I think that they make any salad so much more tasty. For me, I will usually put in a bunch of tahini. I don't really measure, lots of lemon juice, some ice cold water, salt, pepper, and if I have it on hand, maybe a little bit of maple syrup if I want that sweetness, or I'll leave it out and I'll just have it as is. And then I will mix it up really nicely, and if it's a bit thick, I'll add some more water and just make sure it's really pourable. For me, this is something that can sit in the fridge and be used, but to be honest, I basically use it as soon as I've made it. This salad is not like a proper recipe, it's just something I like to make or throw together with some olive oil and yeah, my tahini dressing. If you're not new to my channel, then you will have 100% seen me make this salad, probably multiple times in most of my what I eat in a week videos. This is a recipe by Rainbow Plant Life. It's on her website. All of the recipes that are from websites and cookbooks and stuff will be linked down below. But this salad I really like. It has a lot of vegetables in it. I like to have edamame in there. The dressings are really nice, and it's nice having two different ones. The only thing I change is the noodles. I tend to go for soba noodles just because I'm trying to increase my fiber, and they have a higher percentage of protein in them as well. So I'm much more full after this meal when I have those things kind of included. This recipe is incredibly easy to throw together. It's really refreshing, and it's one of those things I like to meal prep, and I like to have it for my lunches, so it's super easy just to get it out. And I also really like the dressing on both the noodles and the one that goes on the side because I find it to be very interesting. It has tamarind in it, even a bit of cinnamon, but it's also very peanutty and delicious. I really highly recommend this one, and I always make it. As I said, it's a fan favorite. Growing up, a tuna mayonnaise sandwich would be very popular, especially in the UK. And as I grew up, when I stopped eating fish, one of the things that I would replace that with was a chickpea salad instead. Now, this salad is very different from a tuna salad, but it's kind of like the equivalent that people try to get those different flavors, whilst also the chickpeas, when you mash them up, getting that kind of flaky texture. But I like to make this and have it with pasta, but I've recently really liked to put it in a bagel. And honestly, I will throw anything in there that adds a bit of flavor, like some pickle juice, some pickles, lots of herbs like parsley and dill, some mayonnaise and some mustard, salt and pepper, and that's pretty much it. Okay, now onto one of my favorite and most used cookbooks. I make mandu from the Korean vegan cookbook all the time. Even though it feels like a bit of a labor-intensive recipe, I genuinely feel like it's worth it every single time. And I do like to meal prep the dumplings. I like to have loads of them and put them in the freezer so that on the days where I really can't be bothered to cook, or I really want to have something that feels a bit more special or a bit more like I'm getting a treat, like a takeaway, then I will go to the freezer and get those dumplings out. I love this cookbook and have made so many of the recipes from it. I've actually got her new cookbook called Homemade, and that is something I'm going to do a whole video on, as again requested by you, making a whole video trying out lots of different recipes from that cookbook. But I really like the Korean Vegan, the first cookbook. As I said, I make these dumplings, I really love them, and I've also made some of her kimchi recipes as well. Kimchi is quite expensive if you want to get a really good vegan one, and I am lucky that I have a really great one that's local in Denver that I can get from the farmers market. But on the off season, when the farmers market is closed, I do like to try and make my own, and I have used her recipe religiously, and it always works out really well for me. One thing I really love about these dumplings is that all of the ingredients are pretty simple, to be honest. I'm lucky I have an H Mart in Denver so I can get the wrappers from there, but I just use kimchi, lots of different vegetables, some tofu, seasonings, and some noodles. And that's pretty much it that goes in there. One of the things I like the most about making the dumplings is kind of making all the inside stuff and then sitting in front of a film and then just spending time putting them together. I always keep them under a damp cloth because that definitely makes it easier to keep them from drying out. But I also really love the sauce that she makes to go with it as well. Sometimes I'll just put chili oil on if I'm feeling a bit lazy, but other times I will make her sauce, and it's always worth it. Another recipe from her cookbook that I actually like to make all the time, especially to go with the mandu, is actually her quick cucumber cucumber kimchi. It's really easy to make, it doesn't take very long, and you can salt the cucumbers whilst you're doing the other things like wrapping the dumplings. Okay, if you've watched my channel for a while and you've seen that I've made this tofu tikka masala by Rainbow Plant Life 1 million times, this is finally your sign to try it. Yes, it does involve quite a lot of prep work, but I have found a way to make it so much easier. Because the tofu has to be marinated for 2 to 8 hours, I will tend to do this in the morning. Then it kind of splits it up and it makes it feel far more manageable. I also like to do this with someone, if I can of course rope someone into making it with me, because again, it just makes life so much easier. You can split the jobs up, and all that work that goes in with the whole spices and toasting is absolutely worth it. This has hands down become my absolute comfort meal, and I've made it for my family so many times that I get it requested every single time I go home to visit them. I also recently made it for my husband's mum who came to stay with us, and again, she loved it too. Especially with takeaways and food getting more and more expensive, eating out has definitely become like a very big luxury for us. So being able to make something at home that definitely feels like you're having something like an authentic meal, that's a real treat, and tastes very similar to a takeaway. It just makes me feel extremely proud that I can actually make something like this at home. That's honestly the benefit of using whole spices and marinating your tofu for a long time. Even people who don't love tofu, when I've made this for them, they've been really surprised at just how delicious it is. Again, the recipe will be linked in the description, but just remember, this is your sign to finally giving it a go. One other quick thing that I do really love about this recipe is actually making the masala is quite easy and takes far less time than you think it will. And if you want to get a little bit more charring on the tofu that you bake in the oven, just leave it in for a couple more minutes than the actual instructions suggest. Now my next dinner favourite coming in is the Rainbow Plant Life Orzo pasta salad. I actually haven't made this for a while, but it's still up there and I do think about it quite often. It's just a little bit labour intensive, as you can probably tell with quite a lot of these meals that I make. This one I particularly like. I am a big fan of preserved lemons, and this is actually something I show you later in this same video. And this is one of my number one reasons, this recipe, as to why I even make my own preserved lemons in the first place. I'm a big fan of tagines, which also include preserved lemons, but this is definitely the recipe that I predominantly use them for. I really like pasta. This has also got lots of chickpeas, it's got different spices, it's got fresh basil and a gremolata in there. It's really lemony, it's really flavorful, and again, it's one of those meals I make for people if I know that they like these kinds of flavors and I want to try and make something a little bit more exciting for people for dinner. I think because of how much labor goes into this meal and just kind of the ingredients, I don't tend to make it just for my husband and I very often, but actually watching back this footage and making it again seems a lot more appealing because I haven't made it for a while, and I definitely want to start making more recipes that I haven't tried before. Sometimes it's very easy to get stuck in the same recipes that you make all the time, but there is a reason why I make these recipes so often. So maybe this is my sign to make this recipe again and to do a little bit more experimenting. I've definitely been having quite the love affair with burrito bowls and burritos for the past couple of years, and one of my favorite things to put in the mix with all of those is the saucy black beans by Rainbow Plant Life. She also has a recipe in her cookbook called, I think it's black beans with sofritas, but they are very similar to her website recipe as well if you don't have her cookbook. But what I really like about these is they have lots of different flavors, but they are incredibly easy to put together. There's lots of fresh things in there like lime juice and coriander, but then you have a lot of depth of flavor with adobo, with lots of onions, and you actually use the liquid from the black beans when you do make them. This makes it incredibly saucy, and it makes the mixture very thick when you kind of really nicely melt it down. I think I've probably lost count the amount of times that I've made this recipe. I can definitely have the tendency to make or over meal prep this so I have too much of it, but sometimes now what I try to do is if I'm going to do a double batch, I will freeze half of it, and this freezes really well. This is definitely harder to put in burritos just because it is quite liquidy, but it really does well with a burrito bowl, and then you could just throw in all the things that you're really interested in. If you want to have some rice, some fresh salsa, these black beans, maybe even some plant-based chicken or something, and vegetables. It's a really great way to just mix some flavors and build on the flavors that you really like in a burrito bowl. So this is a highly recommended one from me, and it's really easy to pull together very quickly. I like to call this recipe the cupboard staple. It's really easy to pull together if you have the stuff in the cupboard, and these tend to be the ingredients that we personally do have. Things like coconut milk and tomatoes or canned tomatoes. We always have dried chickpeas on hand, or we have some that we've made and in the Instant Pot and put in the fridge. I also do like to put some chickpeas in the freezer once I've cooked them as well, just to prolong their life and make sure that they don't go to waste. But this is very much a recipe that my husband has made for us a bunch of times, and he's kind of perfected it to his tastes over the years. And I think that it's just a really easy weeknight chickpea curry that you can pull together and have with either on its own, with some vegetables, with some rice, or both. One of the things that I did like to do with it recently is to add a tadka to the top of it. Again, this is something I learned from Rainbow Plant Life from her cookbook, and it's just a way to add a huge amount of flavor to whatever curry. Mostly I think people put it on a dal, but I thought it'd be really fun to try it on this chickpea curry. And you're basically heating up some oil and adding in things like mustard seeds and curry leaves and other spices that really add a lot of flavor. And then you're creating a very intensely flavored oil which you pour over the top of your curry or your dal once it's ready. And you want to eat this immediately. It's not really something that you can kind of meal prep. So this is just a very easy curry. I think there are probably lots of standard curries like this online. That's just a very easy chickpea curry that's kind of a cupboard staple. At this point, I feel like I should just become a Rainbow Plant Life fan page because of how many of her recipes I have shared in this video. But I honestly think that her page is the best I've found for vegan curries. And even if you're not vegan, you're vegetarian, or if you do eat meat, I think that her recipes are one of the things that will help you to eat more vegetables and eat more fiber and eat more tofu in a way that is so enjoyable with really delicious flavors. Her Palak Tofu paneer recipe is incredibly easy. It does have a few moving parts, but on the whole it is quite easy once you kind of get it down. And honestly, it's one of the healthier recipes that I have made of hers as well. It's full of flavor, it's full of vegetables, and you can kind of decide what you put in there. Like for example, you can either bake the tofu with these different spices, or if you don't want to do that, you can boil the tofu instead and then put it straight into the recipe. And honestly, I'd eat this probably every single day for the rest of my life. Like I never get bored of this. I know I've said that every recipe in this video is so delicious, and I know I'm repeating myself, but that's because this video really is about all the recipes I love the most and have on repeat, and there's a huge reason as to why these ones were chosen. The same can absolutely be said for these next two recipes, this roasting pan ragu, which I, again, showcase in so many of my videos, and after this, the tofu meatball korma. These are both by Ottolenghi in his cookbook Flavor. And just a reminder, if you want to try out cookbooks but you don't want to buy them, you can rent them from a library just to make sure you actually like the recipes that are going to be in them. Both of these recipes are delicious on different levels. I like the roasting pan ragu because it uses up a lot of cupboard essentials, and it also has some interesting flavors like miso and rose harissa. It also has coconut cream and some other things I wouldn't necessarily think of. I like it because it can go with a lot of different things like pasta or maybe some mashed potatoes or even just roasted potatoes. You can also use this as a base for a shepherd's pie or any kind of lasagna. There's just something about it that it's incredibly rich in flavor and delicious. And now that I understand how the recipe works, it's very easy to pull together because you just put everything in a pot that you can put in the oven, bake it for half the time, you bring it out, put the rest of the ingredients in, and then put it back in the oven. This again is one of my favorite things to meal prep. It freezes really well, and to be honest, when I make it and put it in the fridge, it doesn't really last very long. The next one is the tofu meatball korma. Now this one definitely has some more interesting flavors. I wouldn't say that it tastes quite like a korma that you would get from like an Indian takeaway, for example, but it's definitely delicious and something that I make when I can be bothered. The only reason why I say that is because, again, it's just a little bit labor intensive with making the meatballs on the side with the tofu and the vegetables, and then the korma is actually quite easy to make. It takes a little bit of time just because you have to caramelize the onions for so long, because that is what gives the korma a lot of the flavor. You do have to boil down the almonds and the cashews because that also goes into the sauce, and you kind of blend them up to make it really nice and creamy. There are quite a few other recipes in this cookbook that I do like. I just don't make them as much as these two. But I'm definitely going to try and experiment a little bit more with the other flavors and the other recipes in this cookbook just to kind of make it worth the while of having. When the korma is ready, I tend to put it on just some freshly made rice with a little bit of fresh coriander, and I always like to meal prep ahead some red onions just to pickle them because they really add a nice kind of zing or like different flavor, and they bring out the other really nice flavors in the korma. Now the next recipe is actually from a different creator, from Sarah, from Sarah's Vegan Kitchen. I love a lot of her baking recipes, but this one is a recipe that I was really looking for butter beans because I love butter beans. And this one comes together so quickly and easily. I highly recommend this, especially if you want something creamy and delicious that also has some good proteins, some really nice flavors, and some kale in there. This is her Marry Me butter beans. I'm sure you've seen the kind of Marry Me tofu and Marry Me chicken all over social media in the last couple of years. And to be honest, after trying this recipe, I really do get the hype. I'd say I have meal prepped this before, and I'd say that it's probably better not to meal prep it just because the sauce kind of, I don't know, it's just not as saucy when you heat it up again. If you're looking for a hearty soup/stew kind of thing, then this white bean soup by Rainbow Plant Life is really, really good. I have made my own white bean soup where I've kind of taken the best of bits of other people's recipes and kind of made what I think is the ultimate version, I guess, to suit my tastes. But this is a really nice recipe if you just like on a cold winter's evening when you want lots of vegetables and you want lots of beans. Sometimes when I actually make this recipe and take it camping with me, I will add some pasta in there just to make it a little bit more substantial, because usually when we're camping we're hiking or climbing or both, and it's just nice to add a little bit more in there. But on the whole, I really like this, and having it with some fresh sourdough bread or any kind of bread that you can be bothered to make or buy. And it's actually surprisingly quick to come together. Whenever I look at this recipe, I always think, oh, this is going to take me hours. But really, the longest time is when you just put it in the oven and allow it to do its thing for 25 minutes. When it comes to quick meals, I personally am a big fan of silken tofu. If you're not, then you'll hate this. But one of the things that I like to do is just take some silken tofu out, and then I'll essentially dress it and then put it on some warm rice. So when I say dressing, I'll put on things like light soy sauce, dark soy sauce, some sesame oil, some mirin, probably some sesame seeds. But the kind of hero flavor that I like to put in this is a nice local chili paste or a chili oil rather. Especially if you get a local one, you tend to have some really good kind of chunks of garlic and onion, and then other things I really like it when they have black beans in there or peanuts in there. This is a very simple recipe that comes together. Again, if you like silken tofu, you will like this, but if you don't and you don't like that texture, this will probably be one to skip. Now, one of my favorite sides, which I kind of call herby rice, I guess, is this rice that has lots of different things in it, like olives, pistachios, and then all the herbs that I like. I'll try and put in coriander and parsley if I have both of them, or just one if I only have one. I will chop up like loads of it to put in there. And then I'll add lots of seasonings. So salt and pepper and some chili flakes and za'atar. Za'atar, I think, is just Arabic for thyme. But if you buy a mix, then they have really nice sesame seeds in there as well. It just makes a really nice flavorful side dish that I tend to put with a kind of marinated tofu that I've broiled, and then maybe a tahini dressing as well. It just has some nice crunch and some nice flavors. And yeah, I just think it's a really nice side dish to have. If you're looking for a dip that is kind of got a hummus vibe, but it's just slightly different and has different things like white beans and a really flavorful oil, then I think this white bean dip is probably for you. I initially got an idea for this from Ottolenghi's book In Flavor, but then I adapted it to make it easier and just with fewer ingredients and fewer processes, so I can share that with you if you're interested. But again, it's really easy, and a lot of the flavor comes from the oil of kind of making a garlic confit with all the herbs in that oil, and you're going to use that oil in the actual mixture itself. There's also some serrano peppers in there, which gives it a little bit of heat. And you're kind of just blending everything up in a food processor to make a really nice and smooth texture. Now, I found it really hard to find preserved lemons in the US, so I ended up making my own. And I like to use Maya lemons just because I really like the sweetness that comes with them. They're super easy to make. You just salt them for 24 hours in the fridge, and then you shove them into a jar and cover with the lemon juice from other Maya lemons, and make sure that everything is covered. I use a little bit of a weight, and then I'll put them in the fridge, and in a month's time I will start using them in my cooking. They are so delicious, and I use them in all things from tagines to pasta salads and vinaigrettes as well. Now, when it comes to desserts, there are two that I make quite frequently. And that is, one is the banana bread from Rainbow Plant Life, and the second one is the chocolate pots by Sarah's Vegan Kitchen. The banana bread I really like because you can kind of experiment with different flavors in there. There's a very standard one, but then sometimes I'll add chocolate chips, sometimes I'll add walnuts, sometimes I'll add chocolate chips and walnuts. But this recipe is really nice. It's my go-to. I honestly never even look up another recipe because there just really isn't anything wrong with it. Sometimes I will add a bit too much banana, sometimes I'll add, just be a bit heavy-handed with the cinnamon, but it never really matters because it always turns out really well. Now, to bind things in this, you usually use chickpea, or like the aquafaba, but I did use an egg replacer in this just because I had it in the cupboard and I was doing that as my kind of project pantry video. But usually you'll fluff it up and that makes a really nice texture and consistency. Now when it comes to the chocolate pots, I really like these. They're very silky smooth and they do use silken tofu, but you can't taste the tofu at all. I was a little bit worried about that at the first time I tried that, but I was completely wrong. They did not taste like silken tofu whatsoever. These are really good because they kind of feel very luxurious, but they're very, very easy to make. I did meal prep a couple of them, but that was dangerous because I then had one every day until they were gone. But as I said before, they're a really good option if you want to impress a friend or a loved one or just yourself after dinner one night. Okay, and that's it. These are all of my favorite recipes, from breakfast to side dishes to quick meals to lunches and desserts and breads. And yeah, these are all the things that I make I make them frequently in the time of year that they work best for me. So I do try to eat as seasonally as possible. I tend to make curries and stuff like that more so in the autumn and the winter. And then I will make my salads during the summer. But right now I really have been enjoying that kale and lentil salad. So I have been making that quite a lot as well. I really hope that you liked this video. It did take me quite a long time to edit, so I hope that you really liked it. And as always, if there are any requests that you have, please leave them in the comments below, because this is just the first in the series where I want to make videos that are requested by you in the comment section. Anyway, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up as it really helps to support my channel, and consider subscribing if you liked the video. Okay, thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one.